This is rare because it's coming from your mainstream media. It's coming from the New York Times, which has done nothing, almost nothing, but run coverage for Israel to commit genocide over the past year. There's so much pressure on the world knows what's going on. And so there just comes a point where the New York Times, some of these others, they just can't, they got to talk about it a little bit. How Israel's army uses Palestinians as human shields. After Israeli soldiers found Mohammed Shubair hiding with his family in early March, they detained him for roughly 10 days before releasing him without charge. So obviously, if they had a charge, if they had something they could get him on, if they had any connection to Hamas, they would either disappear him or execute him or something. But they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing, which is why they ultimately let him go. But so what did they do with him for those 10 days? During that time, Mr. Shubair said the soldiers used him as a human shield. Shubair, then 17, so he's a child by U.S. standards. So they grabbed a child and used him as a human shield for 10 days. And this is apparently standard practice, as you'll see in a few minutes. He said he was forced to walk handcuffed through the empty ruins of his hometown, Khan Yunis, in southern Gaza, searching for explosives set by Hamas. To avoid being blown up themselves, the soldiers made him go ahead, made him go in the front. The soldiers sent me like a dog to a booby-trapped apartment. I thought these would be the last moments of my life. This is a strategy by Israel. This wasn't like a momentary coincidence where they were marching a captive ahead of them and he happened to be, the one that would be encountering bombs first. No, this is, they've grabbed someone. They know, they've grabbed a child. They know is innocent because otherwise they would have disappeared him. They know he's innocent. They grab him and they march him into any places that they think might have bombs so that he'll die and not them, if there is a bomb. Investigation by the New York Times found the Israeli soldiers and intelligence agents throughout the war in Gaza have regularly forced captured Palestinians like Mr. Shubair to conduct life-threatening reconnaissance missions to avoid putting Israeli soldiers at risk on the battlefield. Like, Israel's been doing this for the past year, but New York Times waited for a year of light pressure to do some reporting like this to finally do their research. While the extent and scale of such operations are unknown, the practice, illegal under both Israeli and international law, so it's a war crime and it's a crime under Israeli law, has been used by at least 11 squads in 5 cities in Gaza, often with the involvement of officers from Israeli intelligence agencies. Detainees have been forced to scout and film inside tunnel networks where soldiers believe fighters were still hiding. They have entered buildings rigged with mines to find hidden explosives. They've been told to pick up or move objects like generators and water tanks that Israeli soldiers feared concealed tunnel entrances or booby traps. The Times interviewed 7 Israeli soldiers who observed or participated in the practice and presented it as routine, commonplace, and organized, conducted with considerable logistic support and the knowledge of superiors on the battlefield. So all of that is to say, this is not a rogue group of Israeli soldiers. Some of the shit that goes on by Israeli soldiers is a rogue group of Israeli soldiers acting like idiots because they are genocidal maniacs. But most of it is not an accident. This is not a rogue group. This is not a bad apple. This is by design. Like they said, it's organized. It's often done. It's commonplace. It is using human shields, which again, Israel is always trying to project onto Hamas or onto people that Israel's fighting. Oh, they use human shields. No, literally, it's Israel using human shields. And it's kind of hilarious because the people who try and defend Israel's genocide, the Jordan Petersons and the Ben Shapiros and the Bill Maher's, sometimes even Pierce Morgan will say this. They'll list things that Hamas has been accused of. Some of them true, and they'll say, "Oh, they just." Hamas kills civilians and they use human shields and they do this and that. And their end point is Israel's not like that. Israel doesn't do those things. So Hamas is uniquely bad. But the truth is, on a lot of these things, like with the human shields, it's not Hamas doing it. It's Israel doing it. It's Israel legit using human shields. But yeah, so this is a pretty extensive report by the New York Times talking about Israel using human shields, in this case, a child, And they point out that the New York Times points out, oh, we couldn't find out, or we couldn't find anyone who'd been killed doing this, so none of the human shields had been blown up. But here's the thing: of all of the investigation the New York Times did, and most people are able to do, who are you going to talk to? Well, you're going to talk to two types of people. You're going to talk to the human shields who are now released, like this Mr. Shubir. So that's going to be one of the main people. Well, they're going to be dead. And then the other thing is going to be all the witnesses that saw this person killed when they're being used as a human shield. And all those witnesses are going to be, guess what? Israeli soldiers. So if you're talking about them walking into a booby-trapped apartment or something. So those Israeli soldiers are not going to run to the New York Times, whether they're anonymous or not. Not going to run to the New York Times and go, hey, yeah, we used a human shield and we blew a guy up. They're going to claim, no, none of them were ever harmed. So the fact that New York Times hasn't found any that died does not mean that there aren't countless dying as Israel uses them as human shields.